Alright lads, how's it going? Another patch, another blatantly overpowered vehicle, another laughably low battle rating. This is the new Puma IFV for the German tech tree. It's in their 6th rank, and it's currently located at battle rating 8.3, but this is almost certainly going to rise in the future. With its crewless turret, insanely good protection against chemical rounds, and fast-firing APF SDS firing 30mm gun, it certainly is a contender for one of the most broken vehicles to arrive in an update. And you guys thought the Mi-28A was broken. Anyway, in the current state of the game, the Puma will set you back 180,000 research points, as well as 500,000 silver lions to purchase. But again, this is likely to increase in the future. The Puma is the most modern infantry fighting vehicle for the German army, so it makes sense that this is going to be moved further down the tech tree in my opinion. This thing could move to rank 7, but be given its Spike IR missiles, a sort of Israeli version of the Javelin. But anyway, being a tech tree vehicle, it will cost you 140,000 silver lions to put this tank in your lineup. And for the expert in age qualifications, it's 500,000 silver lions and 2,000 golden eagles respectively. In terms of rewards, when playing with a premium account in realistic battles, you can expect an RP modifier of 428% and a silver lion modifier of 210%. In terms of camouflage, you get all the same German camouflages that you would usually get at this battle rating, with my personal favourite being the kart camo. So lads, what is it about this tank that makes it so overpowered? And what battle rating is it likely to increase to? Well, let's get into the video and find out. Alright, mobility and survivability. And the tank is actually pretty good at both of these. To start, the tank has an engine producing 1088 horsepower, which is very high for an infantry fighting vehicle, especially seeing that this tank only weighs 43 tons, giving it a power to weight ratio of 25.3 horsepower per ton. Now, the Puma is a large tank, and is basically the same size as a Striker, or pretty much the same size as a main battle tank. But even though the tank does have such a high power to weight ratio, it does feel slightly sluggish, especially when trying to traverse the hull of the vehicle. But anyway, the tank is fast. You can reach a top speed of 71 km per hour going forwards, and 31 km per hour in reverse. This is by no means bad, and you can keep up with the main battle tanks. Like a lot of the infantry fighting vehicles in the game, you could say that the Puma is mobile, but not really manoeuvrable. Anyway, the survivability. Again, the Puma does excel here. It has explosive reactive armour, as well as composite armour, something which is pretty unheard of for a battle rating 8.3 vehicle. Again, it is under tiered. We also have smoke grenades, as well as a laser warning receiver. All of these features go together to protect the crew of 3 men, all of which are located in the hull of the vehicle. Yes, this tank is a crewless turret, meaning you can effectively go hull down in this tank without risking your crew members. But remember, however, there is ammunition stored in the buttle of the turret. However, this does have a tendency for not exploding if hit though, so it's a little bit of a glitch, so that may get patched in the future. Anyway, the front of the vehicle is where the engine is mounted, like the Israeli Merkava tanks. While this is great against chemical rounds, it doesn't really do anything against kinetic energy rounds. And it's the same for the side protection. Both sides of the Puma are protected by explosive reactive armour. These give you a measly 5mm of protection against kinetic energy rounds, but against chemical energy munitions, such as HEAT-FS, or RPGs, or anti-tank guided missiles, it gives you 500mm of additional armour protection. This is very impressive indeed, and considering there are a lot of battle rating 8.3 vehicles which still rely on HEAT-FS, the tank is insanely strong against these sorts of vehicles, especially in a down tier to battle rating 7.7, where HEAT-FS is the go-to high penetration round. We also have one other incredibly useful feature of the Puma, and that is its Electro Optical active protection system. This is similar to the dazzlers found on some of the T90 variants. It's basically a way to knock off the semi-active command line of sight system of most anti-tank guided missiles. This means tanks such as the BMP-2 or IT-1 can't realistically fire an RPG at you, or an anti-tank guided missile to be more accurate. The same way the T90 forces missiles to go mental basically and just completely disregard the input from the user, this electro-optical system basically does the same thing. You can't really get targeted by an enemy tank. However, this is passive, and your turret must be facing the enemy for this to be effective. So if an enemy gets on your flank and fires an ATGM at you, the missile will still impact you. You have to physically point your turret in the direction of the enemy firing the missile. Needless to say though, still a welcome feature, and very useful. But what about the armor protection itself? Well, against the Puma's own gun at a range of 100 meters, the APFS round can penetrate around 140mm on the upper frontal plate. While this is impressive for an infantry fighting vehicle, it isn't going to stop a chemical or a APFSDS round. On the contrary to most main battle tanks, the majority of the amper protection of the Puma is on the sides. But again, it is an infantry fighting vehicle, so you shouldn't really be trying to get into a trading match with any heavier opponent. As you'd expect, the armour on the turret is much weaker, down to around 1.5 inches of steel. This turret layout is a plus and a minus. On the upside, it does allow you to protect your crew, they aren't exposed to incoming fire, but on the downside, your gun will get knocked out an insane amount. There's nothing protecting it, and the entire turret is basically one large ammo breach, so taking any type of shot is likely to knock out the gun and turret ring. But to conclude this segment, the tank is highly mobile in terms of going forward and backwards. When you try and turn though, it's another matter. Because the vehicle's quite long, it doesn't really want to rotate on its, it doesn't want to traverse its hull that well. That's a problem for any long tank though, so it can't really be down to the Puma's fault. The survivability is impressive, especially against tanks which may only use chemical rounds because they're practically shit out of luck because they can't really penetrate you. Again, almost certainly going to go up in battle rating. We now come on to the firepower, a part of the Puma that isn't particularly overpowered in my opinion. Anyway, it's armed with the 30mm Mark 30-2 /ABM cannon. This is basically a fast-firing 30mm autocannon. It has a 2-plane gun stabilizer, as well as 400 rounds of ammunition, spread across 4 belts. Each belt obviously has 100 rounds of ammunition, and the reload is seamless, basically giving you 400 rounds of ammunition without having to reload. The gun also has very good vertical guidance, with 45 degrees of gun elevation and 10 degrees of gun depression. The crewless turret, in combination with this great gun depression, does make this tank very good at going hull down, and with its 45 degrees of gun elevation, you can target some low flying aeroplanes. As I said, this tank does have a laser warning receiver, a laser rangefinder, as well as very high resolution thermal imaging for both the gunner and commander's sights. But what is a gun without its ammunition? On the vehicle's stock belts contain an APDS round, as well as 2 high explosive rounds. This APDS round, at a range of 500 meters, can penetrate 81mm to flat armor. This is slightly more powerful than the BMP-2's 30mm gun belt, but things get a lot more powerful than that. We also have a stock high explosive Incendiary tracer round belt. This isn't particularly useful in the current meta of War Thunder, although I guess you can use it against helicopters as well as low flying planes. We then also have a high explosive Incendiary timed round. This is the same as the previous high explosive belt, except these rounds have a timed fuse, meaning that if you use your laser rangefinder and set a distance, these rounds will explode after travelling said distance. Bear in mind though, these are not proximity fuse rounds, they are just timed fused. This means they aren't particularly effective against planes or moving helicopters really. You could use them against static helicopters, but in my opinion, they just aren't effective in any of the current engagements in War Thunder. But it's the final round of the Puma where all the fun begins, the PMC 287 round. This is an armour-piercing fin-stabilised discarding sable round, travelling at 1405 meters per second. At a range of 500 meters, this round gives the Puma the ability to penetrate 111mm of flat armour. This is very good, and it's more than enough to penetrate the sides and turret rings of most of the tanks you will come across. However, this ammunition belt will remain largely ineffective against the front of the main battle tanks, and in those cases, you should target either the turret ring, tracks, or the gun. Being such a low caliber APFSDS round, however, they don't particularly have great post-penetration damage, meaning you will have to fire quite a few shots into an enemy. But remember, you do have 400 rounds of continuous fire, so just hold down that trigger button and start taking out crew members. And it's not just the main battle tanks that are vulnerable to this thing. I've killed IS-4s, as well as Conqueror heavy tanks. With over 100mm of penetration with an APFSDS round, there's no really tank in the game that you can't penetrate, with the exception of the Mouse or the E100. Apart from the 30mm autocannon, you do have a rifled cavalry machine gun, mounted coaxially. Well, that's it for the firepower. So, should you grind the Puma? I'm going to say yes. Obviously, it's an incredibly powerful vehicle in the current meta of War Thunder. Will it still be so powerful in the future? Possibly at battle rating 9.0 or 9.3? It probably still is going to be effective in my opinion. It still has the optical electrical dazzlers, and it still has the ERA on the sides, both of which aren't as important at battle rating 9.0 and higher. There are still a lot of infantry fighting vehicles and helicopters at top tier which do use chemical warheads, giving you a quirky yet still practically useful feature at battle rating 9.0 and above. And the armor protection of most vehicles doesn't really improve from 8.3 to 9.0. The gun on the Puma at battle rating 8.3 isn't good enough to go through the front of most of the main vehicles you will face. To be the exact same at battle rating 9.3 or 9.0. You still have to get around the side of the vehicles, which you currently still have to do at this battle rating. So I think this tank is going to see a battle rating increase, that's pretty obvious. And I still think it will be competitive. Currently though, at the battle rating of 8.3, I think it's more the survivability that's the issue rather than the gun. The gun is kind of just the same as the Beg-like Panzer's 57mm, although be it a little bit more powerful. A little bit easier to use because it's a rapid firing high pen gun. But I think a battle rating increase is needed and it won't really destroy the vehicle, I don't think. You'll still have to get around the side of the vehicle. The 30mm gun will still be able to knock out main battle tanks guns at that higher battle rating. So I think a battle rating increase is inevitable, but I don't think it'll negatively affect the vehicle too much. Anyway lads, let me know down below what you guys thought about this vehicle and what other vehicles you guys would like to see reviewed next. If you enjoyed the video, please do consider leaving a like and subscribing. If you really liked the video, do consider becoming a channel member, like Daboa LX, Just Someone, Destroyer 1805, Dr. Bob, Tans, William Tessier, and Lola Alfonsi. Thank you very much lads, thanks again for watching, and I'll hopefully see you in the next review.